So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today with the Woman King. I'm going to call you that, but Her Royal Highness Kgosi. I don't know that I can pronounce your whole name as beautifully as I should do, but you are a very, very beautiful presence in the world. So my name's Dr. Crawford. My passion is, how do we create authentic harmony in the world? We are sitting in the middle of Women's International Month. When we had International Women's Day on Friday, the 8th of March. But really, this month, there's so many events happening everywhere in the world, so many celebrating what we women have achieved. But my question is, what is the next shift? Because we need a paradigm shift to really take us to harmony. And I'd love to know your view on that. What is the shift and where will it come from in terms of women, but also in terms of men?
Thank you very much, Dr. Pauline, and thank you for having me today, having this magical conversation. You know, funny enough, I think in my little time arriving in the US in New York for the session, I've been having internal conversations as well, motivated and by the experiences that I've had since arriving in New York. How do we women create that authentic harmony? How do we, and I think for the past 2 days or so, there's this term that's been on my tongue, solidifying sisterhood. And that's where I think we need to start. I say this because of, like I say, the personal experiences that one has gone through over the past couple of days. How do we women hug one another?
Mm.
You know, how, because we seem to be the greatest contributors in this disjuncture that we find ourselves in. And it's a fact. So perhaps the conversation needs to go back to, why are we not being authentic? Why are we not really genuinely hugging one another and holding each other's hands as women?
That's a very interesting point, because that's my feeling, is that if half the world is female, and we've had 100 years at least of change, and the suffragettes who tied themselves to the railings, and I know, you know, women in your own country who had to deal with horrendous things, it's still happening. So why is it we haven't a clearer dictate to men? And are men afraid?
Well, men, it's two ways for me, in my own personal opinion. Yes, men might be afraid to a certain extent, but on the other hand, because they see the vacuum that we've created as women, and they observe how we women are detrimental to one another, that they also take to their advantage. So that's why I'm saying, as women, it needs to start there. And that's the conversations that should be happening in this type of platform that we have now during CSW, to say, but let's just be honest with one another. Why are we the biggest backstabbers of one another as women? Because as long as we keep on talking equality, empowerment, and all these other things, but not addressing the soft issues, the issues in the tissues, you know,
Yes.
Those issues that really make up the type of quality relations that we want. The relations that would build a formidable force that we want, the force that will bring that authentic change that we so desire. So I sitting from where I'm sitting, I think we still have a long way to go.
So
we still have.
Yes, what I'd love to just share with everybody who watches this is that you had somewhat of a challenge when you took on your role, in terms of you being the first woman king.
Yes.
And how difficult was that? How were other women supporting you to get you to really have that place against men as well?
That's a very good question. Dr. Pauline, yes, there were some women supporting. In fact, women, and there were women who supported but were afraid to be seen. And then there were women who would still say, but this role is supposed to be a role of a man. So we have three categories, those women who are saying, yes, it's time. Yes, we also are equal to play the part, we are equal to the task. And then there are those who would say, yes, but we don't want to be in public about it. And then there will be those who say, no, but we support the view of men, which interestingly is not the majority, by the way. But because of this, the middle bracket that is so afraid to air their views, they'd rather be safe and want to be seen in a certain way by society. But generally, honestly, there was not much there was not much resistance around it, except naturally you would have that percentage who would have a different view. That's part of nature, it has to be like that.
And since you have taken on this role, which has been a couple of years now, is it longer than that?
No.
How is it evolving? How are both men and women really tuning into having a woman king?
It's been 18 months, to be exact. And it's been a good 18 months. Yes, indeed. There is movement, positive movement. There is that support that is rising as well. I think, Dr. Pauline, to me, it's never really a gender issue, to be very, very, very brutally honest with you. To me, it's about competence. Are you competent in the role that you're playing? And if you're competent in it, then that sets you apart, because you're not there because you were put there just for the sake, or just to be a token, or a token. But if you are appointed to a role because of what you embody, because of what the people who have sent you on that particular assignment have seen and have confidence that you will execute, then you sit in that role with contentment to a large extent. You come in very comfortable. You come in content that you also understand the expectation, and you also understand your role, but then also you execute what is expected of you. So you become competent in that role. And I think that that's where, you know, this gender issue should, you know how I feel that sometimes when we say equality, these terms bring disharmony here and there. But once you understand that we are saying if a woman is competent enough to
Yes,
play a role in a certain position, then afford her the opportunity to do so, and afford her the opportunity respectfully so. You know, give her her space, give her all that she needs to be able to excel at what she does.
absolutely. And I think, you know, given what we said before about how women often don't help each other, there seems to be some challenge within women about what competency is. Because I agree with you totally. You know, if a woman is a really good airline pilot, then let her pilot an airline.
Yeah.
We're still surprised when we see women doing that job because it's always been traditionally a man's job. Even in political fields and you know, leading
Yeah.
governments, the majority is still men. And we are equally competent,
Yes.
but do we really value that as women with women? And I think there's a lot of almost we've spent so much time concerned with equality, we have forgotten to educate competencies.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you feel
I
that how can we educate women to be more competent about being women who do take charge, but in a not a male way, but in a female way?
yes. You know, I'm a very strong advocate for that, and I usually say, I execute my duties from a lens of a woman. I can never be a man, and that is my strength. You know, um, so yes, the reason why I'm saying we need to go back, we need to really ask ourselves, why are we the biggest backstabbers of ourselves?
Yes,
Is exactly that. We are not helping advance the agenda, but instead we contribute to the challenges that we face in for the agenda to advance.
yes,
Um, and this is what competence being one of them, really, the elements, you know, but not even just competence, the what you asked earlier, support, but we have these ones who support but are silent in it because they don't want to be deemed in a certain way. And then you still have those who say, but it's a male, it's a role of a man. And what does it say to us? Because it boils down to this issue that I'm saying, when are we going to solidify sisterhood? When are we going to hug one another as women? When are we going to authentically hold each other's hand and say, my sister, if you feel you want to be a diplomat, for instance, and that is what is in your heart, that's your mission. How do we then come as a tribe of sisters, of women around you, and lift you up to attain this goal that you want to attain, you know?
yes,
And once we can start doing that, we would really see the shift. I mean, when you look at gender-based violence, it is women who laugh at other women, you know? We
yes,
still have that. We still have that when something happens to another woman, then you actually come around and drink tea over her. What does that say? And then we go out and we preach all these large terms about advancing the cause of women when we at the same time do the exact opposite.
Yes.
So, it's yeah.
Well, I think this is an interesting thing that you said just recently is that, can we be honest? Can we create authentic? Can we really be honest? And in my study of men and women, men in some ways are much more honest with each other, even if they're brutal.
Yes.
And there is, because women are nurturers and we are, fundamentally different to men in that we nurture the world. And I've really studied this with lots of groups. When you ask men and women to say words to describe both men and women, the word nurture only comes up in the columns about women. So men about women, women about women. The word nurture does not come up in the men's line. Other good words come up, provider, protector, etc. But if you think about the words we use, we don't use the word nurture as a business concept or even a political concept.
Yes.
I don't know that I know any politician who's had a campaign based on the word nurture. And it's fundamental to life. And maybe this is where women are not being honest with each other. I even, I can reflect on that in my own life where I got really annoyed with other women. And I think, no, I don't want to do that because these are my sisters. Although we might be different, we are grown in the same fundamental format. So how do we get that over to women? Because when men are watching, they find that very confusing. If women don't understand other women, then
Yes.
men will
Exactly.
never understand us.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying, that when you asked that question earlier about men, I said it's two-pronged because, the other part, yes, they might be afraid, but the other part is us who are giving them the leverage because of such things, and I think that's the greatest part for me, because if you don't teach people, if we don't teach men and educate them on how it's done, and education, the best type of education is when you practice what you preach, this is how you teach a child, because a child looks and observes at your actions and they mimic your actions. So men will always, and we come back and say, but men don't want to do this. They are looking at us, and their conversations are probably, why do they want us to do ABC when they themselves are doing this to one another?
Yes. Yes.
So yes. So that's what I'm saying. We have a long way to go.
We do. And over the years, I've done research with men, asking men about men. So not asking men about women, but asking men about men. And a couple of very obvious things happen is they really appreciate being asked because they say, nobody seems to worry about what we're thinking because the equality agenda has been that flag the whole time.
Yes.
The other thing they say is, look, we're very straightforward and women are complex. We love women, but we are not like women, and we do everything in a yes, no, straight line. And one of the things I find interesting is that often women don't believe that.
Yes.
So I said to women, this is what the research showed. And many women said, oh, I'll go and sort them out. I said, well, we don't need to sort each other out. We need to be honorable about ourselves, women as women and men as men, and then men and women as the perfect harmony matrix. Do you see that as a possibility in your own country? Do you think that there can be harmony between men and women?
I think there can be harmony between men and women, and not just in my country, but throughout the world.
Yes.
if we have those conversations and try to direct the conversations in the right direction, let me put it like that, because it's also a matter of how the conversation is put, the approach
Yes.
that we need to have. And I think most of where we find ourselves today is a result of the approach that was taken, and with anything that we do, everything has an impact, repercussions to it. So for every action, there's a reaction. So we then need to say, this is where we are. How do we then move forward, and what does that mean? And of course, it's a heated conversation. It's a heated debate, because this women rights and women empowerment thing is so misunderstood that, those who are fierce advocates of it strongly believe that's the correct approach. Does it yield the results that we want to see? Why are the rates of gender-based violence going up? Why are we still having challenges with this equality issue that we are talking about? So that's what I'm saying. Are we having authentic conversations?
Well, this is where, as you know, with my work in my book, the key aspect of a conversation that's going to open the doors, to my mind, is one which has no judgment. Now, I think
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah.
our traditional past, both male and female, political, social, and familiar, is all about judgment. The father
Mm-hmm.
says, no, you're not going out. The mother says, no, you're not wearing that dress today. The teacher says, you're not to talk in class. The politician says, I'm going to save you, and then doesn't, broken promises. Everything has been about a judgment. And
Mm-hmm.
in my experience, this is what blows up the most tricky subjects, because when we have a polar opposite view about something, the something doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
So when I work with a non-judgmental conversation in a time period, it's amazing to watch people sit in that space, because it's not something they're used to. So
Yes.
you're not saying there'll be no action, but you're saying in this first place, let's just actually listen. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that about listening, women to women, women to men. Why in our world today, which is so technically advanced, do we have any gender-based violence? It's appalling, and
Exactly.
the voice has to come from women and men, is that violence is not a human right.
Yes.
And that for me is that they almost, that's the only bit of judgment, is then listening without judgment. What could the world look like if we didn't have this?
Mm-hmm.
What can we be that embraces harmony, and
Mm-hmm.
harmony says no harm? Do you think that, in your experience of the United Nations and what you've experiencing this week, is it possible to have those kind of non-judgmental conversations in an association institution that's very much about policy?
That's a good one. Um, yes, we can.
Good.
We can. Um, as I said earlier, it's all about the approach. How do we approach matters? I think that's where the real trick is. Is it necessary? I think it's very necessary for us to have those conversations if we are to advance in this agenda that we are gathered here for. So yes, definitely.
And I think that's what I'm very interested in, how we can achieve that with both men and women sitting around the table. I mean, the person that comes to mind is the Dalai Lama, because I I met him one time, and he says some amazingly astute things, which are quite factual and determined, but he says it in a way where he invites you to disagree if you want to.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we could maybe aim for with women, because I think women get very upset when they think somebody's disagreeing with you. It's like when women get upset and they break, and that's it, and they don't listen again. Whereas men do the other thing. They don't like each other and they come together and they fight. Now, I'm not applauding fighting, but it's interesting that we need to step into those circles and really be honest with ourselves as women in a way that
Yes.
allows us to think beyond where we are now. A world without violence, a world where gender-based violence doesn't exist anymore. Is that possible?
It's very much possible. In fact, Dr. Pauline, men not only come together and fight, but they fight, and then after fighting, they get along
Yes.
again, you know. Whereas with us, it would be the opposite. We break, and that's it. Myself being one of those, I tend to keep my peace, you know. And I would say what I need to say, but afterwards, then you know, you keep still professional in a professional setting, but then you kind of put your distance, you know, keep a person at arm's length. Sometimes it's necessary, yes, but is it helping the cause,
Yes. Well,
you know? And
I think you're very right. I think one of the things that I've had in my experience working with women and men, but especially with women, is if we want to say something which may be detrimental to what they want to hear, is actually to ask for permission. Like, you know, I've made some observations. May I share them? And then say it in a way which is always positive, even if it's deemed critical. And
mhm,
it's, for me, it's all about the way we say things, the way
yes,
we declare
yes,
us. And there seems to be a rising anger in the world where people, for no good reason, are just getting angry about very small things, even
mhm,
on the streets
mhm,
of the United States where I
mhm,
live. Um, and I feel it's because people don't know how to touch another person
yes,
with words.
yes. I fully agree. I totally agree. Um, in fact, I with my own children, I was recently thinking about it. And it goes even beyond personal relations, you know?
Yes,
How do we get to beyond the surface? And this is a conversation actually that I had earlier today. We were speaking about people just being relating on the surface and not wanting to open up beyond the surface. And that's what we find very common nowadays. Um, is it part of a contributory factor to how we find it difficult to even relate um, to one another lately? Because like you say, even you know, in households, in the workplace, on the streets, there is that it's not easy anymore to relate to one. It's like you have to count the words, you have to see, and when you observe, it's not everyone, the majority, in fact, we could say 90% of the population does not even have the correct approach.
absolutely. So I'm mindful of the fact that we need to educate our young kids We need to
Yes.
go right back to the grassroots. And, you know, dare I say, life has got very noisy and very complicated, and kids are hearing knowledge from all sorts of sources,
Mhm.
and they're playing into the role models that we've given them over decades. And
Exactly.
this is why I'm very passionate that we take the idea of authentic harmony even into the social development goals, because as long as we fight for equality, we're fighting. And I don't think it's natural for women to fight. I think it's natural for women to
The
care
nurture.
and nurture each other
Yeah. Yeah.
and nurture our men
Yes.
without giving away without giving away our freedom.
Exactly.
I'm very blessed that I've never lived in a domestic violence or a gender-based violence situation.
Yes.
But it is appalling to think that, the figures that are quoted about how many women are abused is appalling, let alone the women who are being, and families that are being killed in wars that are, in my mind, unnecessary. So we need to go to the source. And
Yes.
tell me a little bit about She Decides. Is that something that's come from the United Nations?
So She Decides, it's a global movement. Like I say, I got involved through the invitation of the Minister of Social Development, but driven by the work that I do at grassroots level within my community. Let me start first, if you allow me, Dr. Pauline, to just touch on the previous comment that you made about the role of a woman. And I am a strong believer of the same. That's why we have, through my organization, Princess Gabo Foundation, have what we call the Let's Kangaroo Africa campaign or program. And it says, le oja le salimeti in my language. That's what we say, le oja le salimeti, meaning you bend a stick or you shape a stick whilst it's still young.
Yes.
And this is the message that we drive. The slogan for this particular campaign says, teach me how to love. So it's love me, feed me, care for me. And we say, teach me how to love so that I can be able to love, from birth. So it's a program where we promote the use of kangaroo mother care as the preferred method of care, where we say from birth, let's promote the science of skin to skin contact so that a child knows that warmth, a child understands love, so that when they grow up, it's so instilled in them that they are able to give it out, you know? And if we can get that right, I'm sure we will correct so many ills that we have, social ills that we have. So coming back to She Decides, I got involved not necessarily because of that, to say, even though She Decides, the messaging sometimes is not really, and it goes with the approach again, where they'll say, through abortion, same sex, and all those things. And I say, we say to our children, you decide what your sexual health and reproductive issues, but you do that responsibly. You do that informed. So that was my main reason of saying, okay, maybe I want to be involved in this, to have my word and my input in it, to say, yes, we are saying so, but can we not just put messaging out there that children and young girls don't understand? We say all these things, but you should then motivate what you're saying so that they get it. They
Yes.
get that with everything, there's responsibility. The choices, and I always say to my children, you live by the choices you make.
Yes.
That's my slogan in my own household. You live by the choices you make. So if you choose a certain path, you should know that it's got its comeback,
Yes.
positive or negative, you know? So yes, that's basically it.
So this is the She Decides is a global
It
movement.
is. It
And
is.
and again, I think what's wonderful in today's world is there are so many amazing movements. You know, I'm part of the G100 network, so many women's networks, so many empowerment networks. But we really need to get these conversations going. I'm very keen to, you know, I call them magical conversations because they are without judgment. And magic to me is the belief of the unbelievable, you know, the unbelievable being that we could create a
Yeah.
joint custody world. We can create a world where, like nature, nature lives together. You know, okay, some animals kill some animals, I know that, and some plants die, but generally nature's got a good handle on how to work and how to work in unity. So we don't find the wrong flowers built, you know, growing in the wrong place. And trees have
We're
a life, you know, it's
yeah,
really amazing. And I think as
yeah,
human beings, we could do that. And women have the best steer.
yes. Dr. Pauline, we are so aligned. We are so aligned because that's my greatest belief. In fact, I say women, human beings are as Christians, we say my people, the Bible says my people perish because of lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And this is because we thought we know more than God. Now, when you look at nature, I usually use a term that human beings have unnatured nature. And I think I've said this before.
Yes.
So when you look at how the animal kingdom, for instance, the ecosystem, the environment is still intact. It
Yes.
is us human beings who are actually disrupting it. That's why we have global warming. That's why we have all these challenges. But when you go and actually go into, you observe, nothing has changed. The hierarchy is still the same. The
Yes.
ecosystem cycle still goes as it is. Then who's the problem in this equation?
So what comes to mind is how can we disrupt those elements that are stopping us getting back to nature? Um, I'm not against policies, but I always think as soon as you've got a policy, you've got to police it. And then it's all down to interpretation. And it is
Mhm.
about the ethical side of it, the integrity side of it. And it's like compassion. I remember some client saying to me, "Oh, I'm very compassionate about that group over there." I said, "You can't be choosy about being compassionate." You know, and I think what we're not doing is we're not teaching some of these very basic things in school. And it's not even teaching, it's facilitation. We, in our university, we have an amazing PhD who actually runs a school in Kuala Lumpur on the basis of total student engagement. And even from the age of 4, the child is in charge of his own destiny, his, her. And doesn't mean there's not discipline. There is a strategy, there's a structure, but there's an attitude which says, you're important and I need
Yeah,
to know what you need. And I wonder whether women we've got so locked into this, we've got to be in charge, we've got to be equal,
yeah,
we've got to be
yeah,
in the place. I've always shared the last few years, let's let go of that and women be women and men be men, but let's
yeah.
change change the landscape, change the ecosystem, and have it much more conversational, much more giving and receiving, much more. And even in the business world, this makes far more wealth for everybody.
Exactly.
And that's true. So as we come to this end of this amazing, magical conversation, what one thing can we advise women to do now?
I think my advice to women would be, let us try to be more compassionate to one another. Let us try to give each other love, because that's where all things begin. If we can just master that, I think we can be able to firstly come together as women, because that's my biggest cry. That's my biggest concern. We cannot expect the world, or anyone for that matter, let alone men, to drive to have a certain expectation of them while we are not practicing the same. So I would say, let us now have those internal conversations as women and actually say, like I say, solidify the sisterhood, and really, really hug one another.
Absolutely.
Authentically so.
So we need lots and lots of magical conversations, but
We
I
do.
want to thank you for sharing. I know you've been on some of my wisdom circles before, and I'm going to start a lot more of those. And I think together we can make a difference in the world. So let's finish this particular magical conversation, and let's get some feedback from those that we find out there in the world of women and men. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Pauline, thank you for this opportunity once again. It is really always good to connect, and also acknowledging the work that we have set before us, which I believe, when the time is right, the Lord will make happen. And
Absolutely.
until then, we are still here.